The storm came without mercy. It rolled across the Minnesota flatlands like something alive, like something with a grudge against warmth and light, and the small human comforts that make winter bearable. By 4 in the afternoon, the sky above Oak Ridge had turned the color of a bruise. By 6, the wind was hitting 60 miles an hour. By 8, the power lines along Maple Creek Road began to snap under the weight of ice one by one, like fingers breaking. The lights went out across Oak Ridge at 8:47. Maddie Harmon knew the exact time because she had been watching the clock on the kitchen wall, the one with the blue rooster painted on its face that James had bought at a flea market in Duluth the summer before he died. She had been watching it the way a person watches a door they are afraid to open. Not because she expected anything to happen, just because watching something was better than sitting in the silence and letting the silence watch her back. When the clock stopped, she counted the seconds in her head. 1, 2, 3. The camping lantern on the kitchen table flickered on. She had set it there 2 hours ago before the storm hit full force because she had lived in Minnesota long enough to know what a blizzard of this size could do to a town. James had taught her that. James had taught her a great many things she still found herself using 8 years after the accident. 8 years after the 2 police officers knocked on her door on a Tuesday afternoon with their hats in their hands and their faces arranged into an expression she had never seen before and never wanted to see again. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The house was getting cold. The furnace ran on electricity, and the electricity was gone, and the cold was already working its way in through the window frames and the gap under the back door that James had been meaning to fix for 3 years before he ran out of years. Maddie was 71 years old. Her right hip ached in cold weather the way it always did, a deep, grinding ache that no amount of ibuprofen had ever fully touched. Her hands, wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold, were stiff at the knuckles. She sat in James's chair. She always sat in James's chair when she was alone and afraid, which was more often than she would ever admit to anyone. It was a big armchair, brown corduroy worn smooth at the armrest from 30 years of his elbows. It still smelled faintly like him on certain mornings. Cedar and motor oil and something she could never name but would recognize anywhere. She had washed the slipcover exactly once in 8 years and then never again. The storm screamed outside. Something hit the side of the house, a branch or a garbage can blown loose from the Hendersons next door. The windows shook in their frames. The camping lantern threw long, jumping shadows up the kitchen walls, and Maddie sat inside those shadows and listened to the storm try to unmake the world outside her door. She thought about Leroy. She always thought about Leroy when the house felt too empty. Her son, 43 years old now, though she still saw him at every age when she closed her eyes. 12 years old, coming home from school with his shirt untucked and a library book tucked under each arm. 19, standing in the kitchen doorway with a scholarship letter in his hand, grinning so wide she thought his face might split open from the joy of it. 29, sitting in a hospital bed with the track marks on his arms and a social worker explaining the program to her, while Leroy stared at the ceiling and refused to look at either of them. 43 years old, 5 years of silence. She did not know where he was tonight. She did not know if he was warm. She did not know if he was alive. These were the 3 thoughts that lived permanently at the back of her mind, like stones she carried everywhere, stones she had learned to walk with, even though they never got lighter. The front door of Maddie's house had a deadbolt and a chain and a regular lock in the handle. For 5 years, she had locked the chain and the deadbolt every night before she went to bed. But she had never in all 5 of those years locked the handle lock during the day. She told herself it was habit. She had never locked it during the day when James was alive, and old habits held on with a grip that defied logic. But the truth, she kept folded small and tucked away where she did not have to look at it often, was simpler and more painful than habit. She left it unlocked because she was still waiting. Because some part of her, the part that had held Leroy in a hospital at 3 in the morning and promised God any number of terrible trades if he would just let the baby be all right, that part refused to accept that her son would never come home. An unlocked door was not a strategy. It was a prayer without words. Tonight, for the first time in 5 years, Maddie had gotten up from James's chair and walked to the front door with the intention of locking it. She could not have explained why, tonight specifically. Maybe it was the storm making the house feel more fragile than usual. Maybe it was the cold working into her bones. Maybe it was simply the weight of 5 years of waiting, finally reaching a tipping point, the way water fills a cup slowly and then all at once goes over the edge. She had her hand on the handle lock. She had her thumb on the button. She had not yet pressed it. That was when the pounding started. 3 heavy blows against her front door. The sound was enormous out of proportion, a sound that did not belong in a residential neighborhood on a winter night. It hit her in the chest like something physical, and her heart, which was not as young as it used to be, lurched sideways in a way that made her take her hand off the lock and press it flat against her sternum. She stood very still. 3 more blows. Harder. Maddie's mind went immediately and involuntarily to the break-in 14 months ago. The kitchen window she had left cracked in September because the room got stuffy when she baked. The man who had come through it at 2 in the morning, taken her television and the cash she kept in the coffee can above the refrigerator and the small silver frame with her wedding photograph. The police officer who had said the words they had described him as transient and unpredictable, and you are very fortunate you slept through it. She had installed the 5 locks after that. She had started checking them twice every night. She had started sleeping with the bedroom door closed and a flashlight on the nightstand. 3 more blows. Then a voice coming through the door, muffled by the storm, but carrying something in it that the storm could not quite swallow. The voice was desperate, not loud, desperate. There is a difference, and Maddie Harmon had been alive long enough and through enough to know exactly what that difference sounded like. Someone out there was at the very edge of something. She could hear it the same way you can hear the difference between a person crying from grief and a person crying from fear. She made herself move to the door. The peephole was cold against her eye. The porch light was out and with the power, but there was enough ambient light from the snow itself. Snow throws light back up in a strange way on a blizzard night, just enough for her to make out the shape of the figure on her porch. Big, extraordinarily big. Wide through the shoulders, the kind of wide that suggested not fat, but the particular mass that comes from a life of physical labor. Long hair plastered dark and wet against a face she could not fully read. She could see the arms. She could see the tattoos even through the peephole in the darkness. They went up the neck. They disappeared into the collar. She could see the jacket. Black leather, heavy even from a distance. And on the back, even in the half-dark, she could make out the shape of the patch. She had seen that patch before on television and newspapers, in the kind of stories that did not end well. The skull with wings, the words beneath it, Hell's Angels. Maddie stepped back from the door so fast she nearly lost her footing. She grabbed the wall with one hand and stood there breathing. Her heart was doing something complicated. She pressed her hand harder against her chest and tried to slow everything down the way the doctor had told her to. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The pounding came again. Then the voice, clearer, now more desperate, pushed through the door by something beyond ordinary want. Please, I know someone is home. Please, I need help. Maddie did not move. I'll go. I'll leave right now, but please, can you just take him? Just take my son. The word stopped her. Son. She did not know she was moving until she was already at the peephole again. The man had shifted his weight. He had turned slightly, and now she could see what she had not seen before, what the darkness and her fear had hidden from her in those first seconds. He was holding something, not a weapon, not anything dangerous. He was holding a child, a small child, maybe 4 years old, wrapped in blankets that had gone stiff with ice. The child's face was visible over the man's shoulder. Even through the peephole, even in the dark, she could see the color of that. Gray-blue, the lips nearly black. Please, the man's voice cracked completely. He is not breathing right. I have knocked on 6 houses. 6. He is 4 years old and he is dying. I am begging you. You do not have to let me in. Just take him. Just take my boy. Maddie heard something then. A sound from the child, thin and frail and barely there, like a sound a bird makes when it has flown into a window. Just a small, struggling exhale. She knew that sound. She had heard that sound exactly once before in her life. Leroy, 18 months old, in his crib at 3 in the morning with pneumonia filling his tiny lungs. That exact sound, that exact terrible, barely there sound of a small creature fighting with everything it had just to stay on the right side of breathing. Her hands moved to the locks before her mind gave them permission. The chain first, then the deadbolt, then the handle lock she had been about to press for the first time in 5 years. She pulled the door open. The wind came through like a fist. It knocked the breath out of her and drove snow sideways across her hallway floor and raised the temperature inside by about 15 degrees in the wrong direction. She had to grab the door frame to stay upright. The man filled the doorway completely. Up close, he was larger than the peephole had suggested. 6'4" at least. The shoulders of a man who had spent his life doing physical work. The face was rough-cut, unshaved, weathered in the particular way of someone who spent time outdoors regardless of weather. The tattoos were everywhere. Up the neck, across the knuckles. She could see words she could not read and images she did not try to interpret. The jacket was covered in patches she did not try to read either. His eyes were streaming tears, actual tears, running down through the snow on his face and dropping off his jaw. He was not trying to hide them. His name is Eli. The man's voice was shaking hard. He is 4. We went down on black ice 3 miles back. I carried him. I knocked on 6 houses, 6 doors. Every one of them looked through the peephole and closed it. Maddie looked at the child. Up close, the boy's face was the color of old dishwater. His lips were dark purple. His small chest rose and fell in a rhythm that was too fast and too shallow and too wrong in every way Maddie's maternal instincts knew how to recognize. One small hand hung loose from the edge of the blankets. It was the color of the snow. "Get inside," Maddie said. "Both of you. Right now, move." The man Cole Decker stumbled through the doorway. He was moving carefully despite his size, careful with the boy, the way a man is careful with something he is terrified of dropping. Maddie grabbed his arm to steady him and was briefly staggered by the sheer mass of him, like grabbing the arm of a building. "Kitchen. This way." She moved as fast as her hip would allow her cane tapping against the hardwood floor. He followed tracking ice and meltwater across the clean floor. She did not look at it. In the kitchen, the camping lantern threw its orange light across the walls. Maddie swept her arm across the kitchen table. Yesterday's mail went to the floor. Her reading glasses followed. She did not care. Lay him flat, on his back, right here. Cole laid the boy down on the kitchen table with a gentleness that was startling in a man of his size. The child barely moved. His chest rose and fell in that terrible shallow rhythm. His lips were nearly black. Maddie bent over him. Her spine protested. She pressed her ear to his small chest. The heartbeat was there. Weak, fluttering, but there. How long has he been like this? Cole's voice when he answered was the voice of a man who had been holding everything together through an act of will so enormous, it was only now in the warmth of someone else's kitchen beginning to fail. Maybe 30 minutes. He was talking at first. Then he got quiet. "I thought quiet was better. It is not better. When they stop crying, that is bad." Maddie said it plainly. "We need to warm him. Slowly, too fast, and you can stop the heart. Go to the bathroom. Second door on the left. There is a hairdryer plugged in by the sink. Bring it here." Cole moved instantly, his heavy boots loud down the hallway. Maddie worked. Her arthritic fingers were slower than she wanted them to be, but they did not stop. She stripped away the outer layer of ice-stiff blankets. Beneath them, the boy wore a thin jacket and jeans with holes at both knees. His sneakers were canvas in a Minnesota blizzard. She went to the linen closet without being asked. She took down every blanket she could carry, including the heavy wool one from the bottom shelf, the one she had folded carefully and kept there for 8 years, because it had been James's favorite, and using it still felt like grief, and not using it felt like waste. She did not hesitate. She brought them all back and wrapped the boy in them, one layer at a time. Cole returned with the hairdryer. "Plug it in by the stove. Set it on low. Do not let it stay in one spot." She directed the warm air across the boy's chest, moving it continuously, never stopping. Her hand cramped around the dryer after 5 minutes. She did not stop. "Talk to him. Say his name. Let him know you are here." Cole dropped to his knees beside the table. The enormous man kneeling. His face pressed close to his son's small face. "Eli, buddy, it is Dad. I am right here. You are inside now. You are warm. A woman named Maddie is helping us. You are safe." Cole's voice broke on the last word. He pressed it back together and kept going. "You are safe, buddy. You hear me? You are safe. The tears had not stopped running down his face. He was not wiping them. He simply let them fall the way a person does when they have moved beyond caring what they look like and into somewhere much more essential. Maddie kept the warm air moving. 1 minute, 5, 10. Her back ached. Her hips sent sharp signals up her spine. Her hand cramped tighter. She did not stop. 20 minutes and Eli's chest began to change. The rhythm slowed from its frantic, shallow pace and deepened. Just slightly. Just enough to notice if you were paying close attention, which Maddie was. Come on, sweetheart. You come on back now. 30 minutes. Eli coughed. Cole made a sound that Maddie had never heard from an adult man before. Half sob, half something that did not have a name. He grabbed his son's small hand in both of his enormous ones. 45 minutes. The blue-gray color was leaving Eli's face. Slowly, the way dawn comes on a winter morning, reluctant and gradual, and then suddenly unmistakably there. Pink crept back into the boy's cheeks. His lips lost their terrible darkness. His chest rose and fell in a rhythm that was beginning to resemble the rhythm of someone sleeping, rather than someone struggling. Maddie set the hairdryer down on the counter. Her hand was shaking too hard to hold it. Eli's eyes opened. They were dark brown, James's color exactly. Daddy. The word came out in a whisper, barely audible. But there, Cole pressed his son's hand against his face. He could not speak for a moment. He just held that small hand against his jaw and breathed. I am here, he finally managed. Right here. You are okay. Eli's eyes moved slowly to Maddie. His forehead wrinkled the way a child's does when something does not match any category they have available. Who is the lady? Maddie pulled the stool from under the counter and sat down on it heavily. Her body was informing her in no uncertain terms that it was done with standing for the moment. My name is Maddie, she said. You can call me Miss Maddie. Eli looked at her with the direct, unfiltered gaze of a 4-year-old who has not yet learned that staring is impolite. Are you going to make us leave? The question hit Maddie somewhere below the ribs. 4 years old, already expecting to be turned away, already carrying in his small body the knowledge that doors closed. No, baby, she said. You are staying right here until you are warm and safe. Both of you, I promise. Eli's eyes filled with tears, not from cold or fear, from something else, something simpler and more devastating. Thank you. Cole covered his face with both hands. His shoulders shook. Maddie stood up and turned to the stove and put the kettle on because the kindest thing she could do for that man in that moment was give him somewhere private to fall apart. She made chamomile tea, 2 cups, one with extra honey because it was past midnight and the body needed sweetness in the dark. She set the cups on the table. Cole had pulled himself mostly together. Mostly. His eyes were red. His hands still shook slightly around the cup when she handed it to him. Drink, she said, both of you. She helped Eli sit up and held the cup for him. He drank the tea in small, careful sips, watching her over the rim with those dark eyes. After a while, Maddie pulled out the chair across from Cole and sat down. Her hips settled into a dull throb she could manage. It was past midnight. She should have been exhausted. She was not. She was something else. Alert in the particular way of a person who has just been very close to something irreversible and come out the other side. She looked at Cole Decker properly for the first time. She looked past the tattoos, past the jacket draped over the back of his chair, the skull and wings patch face up in the lantern light, past the size and the roughness and everything about him that her fear had organized into a single category when she first saw him through the peephole. She looked at his hands. They were still shaking slightly around the cup. She looked at his eyes, hollow, dark-circled, the eyes of someone who had not slept a full night in a very long time. When did you last eat? She asked. He blinked, as if it were a question in a language he had not been expecting. This morning, I think. Eli had lunch. I made sure he had lunch, but not you. He looked down at his tea. We are running a little short. I stretch it. He eats first. Maddie got up and went to the refrigerator. There was leftover chicken soup from 2 days ago. She put it on the gas burner, thankful for the 3rd time this winter that she had never let James talk her into switching to electric. You cannot take care of a child if you are falling apart, she said her back to him. Cole was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. I know that. She heard something collapse in those 3 words. Not the dramatic collapse of someone performing grief. The quiet collapse of someone who has been holding a weight too long alone and has simply finally run out of the particular kind of strength that holding requires. She kept stirring the soup and waited. He started talking. My wife, Sarah, she passed 8 months ago. Cancer, stage 4. They found it late and it moved fast. She fought hard. God, she fought. But it went the way it was going to go anyway. Maddie did not say she was sorry. She had been on the receiving end of enough sorries to know they landed like stones in water, made a small splash, and then sank without changing anything. She said, "What was she like?" Cole looked at her, as if the question surprised him. As if most people asked about the illness, the treatment, the timeline. Not about her. Smart, he said. Funny. She had a laugh that could clear a room in a good way. People just wanted to be near it. She worked at the library. She loved books the way some people love air. She used to say I had the most frightening face she had ever seen, hiding the most ridiculous sense of humor. His voice went rough. Eli asks about her every day. Where is mommy? I tell him she is in heaven. He says okay. I do not think he understands yet what okay means in that context. You do not explain death to a 4-year-old, Maddie said. You just love them through it. Cole looked at her, really looked. The way you look at someone who has said something that is exactly right. You have lost someone. My husband, James, 8 years ago in January. He was coming home from the hardware store. A drunk driver ran a red light at 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. She set a bowl of soup in front of Cole. He picked up the spoon, but did not eat yet. 1 minute I was deciding what to make for dinner, Maddie said. The next minute, there were 2 officers standing on my porch with their hats in their hands. I am sorry, Cole said. So am I. She sat back down across from him. She paused. Then she said the thing she almost never said out loud. I also have a son, Leroy. He is alive, but I have not seen him in 5 years. Cole looked up. Leroy was a good student. Scholarship to the University of Minnesota. I was so proud I cried at the acceptance letter. She paused. He fell in with people who were going nowhere fast, and then he started using. Pills first, then harder things. He dropped out, started taking money from me. Small amounts at first, then more. Then one day he took James's watch and my grandmother's ring, and I called the police, and when they found him and brought him home, he stood in my kitchen and told me I had ruined his life. She stopped. He left 5 years ago. I do not know where he is tonight. I do not know if he is warm. Cole set down his spoon. I am sorry, he said. So am I. The storm howled outside. The lantern threw its orange light across the kitchen table. Eli had fallen asleep again, warm now, his chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of a child who has come back from somewhere too cold and too dark and is grateful for the warmth without knowing how to say so. Cole ate the soup, all of it. They talked until nearly 3 in the morning, the way 2 people sometimes talk when they meet in a crisis and the usual social scaffolding has been stripped away and there is nothing left but the essential things. Sarah's laugh, James's chair, the particular silence of a house where someone used to be, the specific terror of loving someone you cannot save. At some point, Cole asked if he could do anything, something, anything. You fixed your wife's car, Maddie said. You know engines. I know everything that has a motor in it. My furnace runs on electricity, but the water heater is gas. It might still be working. The pilot might have gone out in all this. If it is still lit, there may still be hot water. I cannot get down to the basement the way my hip is. Cole was up before she finished the sentence. She heard him in the basement, heard the sounds of a man who knew what he was doing. Not hesitant sounds, but purposeful ones. 7 minutes later, he came back up. The pilot was out. I relit it. You will have hot water in about 20 minutes. Maddie nodded. Thank you, she said. It is nothing, he said. It is not nothing to me, she said. They sat back down. Eli slept. The storm continued its argument with the world outside. At some point near 4 in the morning, Cole's head began to drop. He caught himself twice. The third time, he did not catch himself. Maddie got a blanket from the closet. She put it over Cole's shoulders where he sat slumped in the chair. She pulled another one over Eli on the table. She turned down the lantern until it was just a soft glow and went to James's chair in the living room and sat down. She sat there for a while in the near dark. She thought about 6 doors. 6 houses where Cole Decker had knocked and been turned away. 6 times he had stood in the worst storm of the year with a dying boy in his arms and been looked at through a peephole and found wanting. She thought about what that felt like. She thought about what it cost a person to keep knocking after the first door, the second, the third. She thought about what kind of love it took to still be knocking at the sixth. She thought about the seventh door, the one she had almost locked. After a while, she got up and went to the hallway closet and took down her sewing kit. Eli's bear had a torn seam along the bottom where the stuffing was starting to push through. She had noticed it earlier and intended to fix it. She brought the bear back to the living room and settled into James's chair with the lantern turned up slightly and began working on the seam with careful, slow stitches. When she reached the halfway point, her needle caught something. She thought it was an extra bit of stuffing at first, but it crinkled under her fingers in a way stuffing did not crinkle. She pinched it between 2 fingers and drew it out carefully through the opening in the seam. A piece of paper, small, folded into a precise square. The folds were tight, deliberate. Someone had placed this here on purpose. Maddie sat very still for a moment. Then she unfolded it. The handwriting was small and careful. The handwriting of someone who wanted to be very clear and did not have much space to be clear in. The paper was good quality, not a scrap, the kind of thing someone would choose specifically for something they meant to last. To whoever loves my son after I am gone. Maddie's breath stopped. You are exactly the person I prayed he would find. I do not know your name, I do not know your face, but I know you are good because my Eli found his way to you, and I have asked God every night for 8 months to lead him only to good people. I am sorry I could not stay to see it. Please love him as long as he needs it. Please see him clearly. He laughs with his whole face. He is afraid of the dark, but he will not admit it. He likes his sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares. These are the things that matter. Thank you for opening the door. Sarah Decker. Maddie sat in James's chair in the near dark with a storm shaking the windows and 2 strangers sleeping in her kitchen and the handwriting of a dead woman in her hands, and she did not move for a long time. Sarah Decker had known she was going to die. She had known with enough advanced knowledge to fold a letter and sew it into a bear to write out the sandwich preference of a 4-year-old to a stranger she would never meet. She had prepared a message for a person she could not possibly know existed, and the bear had ended up here, in this house, in Maddie's hands. Maddie folded the letter carefully, exactly along its original creases. She put it in the pocket of her housecoat against her chest near her heart. She did not know yet what she would do with it. She only knew she would not give it back tonight. Tonight it needed to stay where it was. She put the bear down on the end table. She turned off the lantern completely. She sat in James's chair in the dark and listened to the storm and thought about letters and doors and the strange arithmetic of what finds us and why. She thought, James, are you watching this? She thought she heard in the wind outside something that might have been an answer or might have been just wind. She had learned in 8 years of widowhood not to push too hard on that distinction. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but she rested. By morning, the storm had quieted to an ordinary heavy snowfall. Cole woke at 6 and was immediately embarrassed about having fallen asleep. He checked on Eli first, who was awake and wanting to know if there were pancakes. Then he looked at Maddie in the chair. You should have woken me, he said. You needed it more than I did. He helped her up, his enormous hand gentle as anything under her elbow. She let him. Her hip was worse in the morning cold, and she knew the limits of pride. They made breakfast together, eggs and toast because she had both, and the gas stove did not need electricity. Eli sat at the table wrapped in the wool blanket and ate 4 pieces of toast with jam and told Maddie that his dad made better pancakes, but her toast was the best toast he had ever had in his life. She told him that was the finest compliment she had received all year. He seemed to take this seriously. Cole fixed the gap under the back door while the eggs were cooking. He found the weather stripping in the hall closet and put it in without being asked efficiently and without making a production of it. By the time they sat down to eat, the draft was gone. After breakfast, Cole put on his jacket. He stood at the front door for a moment holding his helmet. Eli was in the living room examining James's bookshelf with the methodical interest of a very small person in a new place. I do not know how to repay this, Cole said. You do not, Maddie said. You come back when you are on your feet and you tell me how the boy is doing. That is payment enough. Cole reached into his jacket and produced something. He held it out. A patch. Not the big back patch with the skull. A smaller one. The kind worn on the front of the jacket. You show this to any Hell's Angel anywhere, he said. You say Cole Decker gave it to you and that you are under his protection. They will help you. Any of them. Anytime. I promise you that. Maddie took the patch. She looked at it for a moment. Then she put it in her pocket next to the letter from Sarah. You be careful on those roads, she said. Cole looked at her the way a person looks at someone they expect not to see again, but want to memorize anyway. Thank you, he said. Not just for the boy, he paused, for opening the door. He took Eli's hand and they went out into the white morning, the boy turning to wave 3 times before they reached the motorcycle. Cole had it running in a minute. She watched them go down Maple Creek Road until they disappeared around the bend, 2 shapes becoming smaller and then becoming nothing. She stood on the porch for another minute. The cold was sharp and clear. The storm had spent itself in the night and left behind the particular stillness that comes after. She went back inside. She made herself another cup of tea. She sat in James's chair. She put one hand in her pocket and felt the patch with her fingers. She put her other hand in the other pocket and felt the letter. She thought about Eli's question, the one that had landed like a stone. Are you going to make us leave? She sat with that question for a long time. 3 days later, Maddie was in Miller's grocery on the canned goods aisle when she heard the voices. She was not trying to listen. She did not need to try. The voices were not being careful. Did you see it yourself? My own 2 eyes. 2 in the morning, and she let him straight in. The jacket, though, I know what I saw on that jacket. Maddie stood very still. Her hand was on a can of soup. She set it down carefully. At my age, what could she be thinking? Some people get lonely and stop thinking straight. That is what happens. Maddie turned around. 2 women. One she recognized as Doris Ketterman from the post office. The other she recognized even faster with something in her chest that was not quite pain, but was close to it the way coal can be close to burning. Norma Fisk. 22 years. That was how long Maddie and Norma had known each other. They had met at a church ladies' potluck in the winter. Leroy was 20 years old and Norma had been the first person to make Maddie laugh after James died, and Maddie had been the one who driven Norma to chemotherapy 3 times a week in 2019, every Tuesday and Thursday without exception for 4 months. They had that kind of friendship, the kind that people mean when they say the word sister without being related. Norma saw Maddie. Her face went through several things very quickly. Maddie looked at her. She said, Norma, were you the 6th house? The question was quiet. It was not accusatory. It was simply a question that needed answering. Norma's expression was the answer. Maddie stood looking at her friend for a long moment. Then she picked up her can of soup and put it in her basket and walked to the checkout without another word. She hung up her coat. She put the groceries away in the right places, each item in its proper cabinet, the routine of it grounding her. Then she stood in the kitchen and let herself feel it. Norma Fisk had looked through her peephole at a man holding a dying child and had closed her door. And then she had stood in the grocery store 3 days later, whispering about Maddie's judgment. Maddie thought about what it must have looked like from Norma's peephole. The jacket, the tattoos, the storm. She understood fear. She had felt it herself. She had felt it for those long seconds before she opened the door, the animal fear that lives below thought. But she had opened the door anyway. 6 houses had not. Maddie went to the front door. She looked at the handle lock, the one she had been about to press for the first time in 5 years. She thought if I had pressed it 5 minutes earlier, if I had locked it and gone back to bed. She thought about Eli's lips, the color they had been. She thought about the sound he had made. She thought about Cole's face when the boy coughed for the first time and the color started coming back. She thought that boy would be dead. She reached into her pocket. She felt the patch. She felt the letter. She did not lock the door. That evening, the phone rang. She did not recognize the number, but she answered it because she had always answered unknown numbers because Leroy called, sometimes from phones that were not his. Mrs. Harmon, this is Pastor Gerald at Oak Ridge Community Church. I am calling because some members of our congregation have expressed concern. She waited. About a situation at your home. A man, a Hells Angels man, seen entering your home in the early morning hours. We are all simply concerned for your well-being and at your age, and I feel it is my pastoral duty to reach out and ensure Maddie listened to him talk for 30 more seconds. Then she said, Pastor Gerald, I saved a child's life. And she hung up. She sat back down in James's chair. Outside, she heard something. She went to the front window and looked through the curtain. The porch light was still out from the power outage, but there was enough light from the street lamp 3 houses down to see her welcome mat. Someone had painted on it, red spray paint. 2 words she read and then looked away from. She went to the kitchen and got the bucket. She got the scrub brush and the dish soap. She put on her coat and her boots. She went outside into the cold, and she knelt down on the porch, which was deeply unpleasant for her hip, and she began to scrub. She scrubbed for 20 minutes. Her hands went numb. Her knees ached. The paint faded but did not fully disappear. Across the street, she could see the light on in Norma Fisk's living room. She could see the faint shape of someone at the window. Norma Fisk was watching from her window and not coming out. Maddie scrubbed. When the paint was as gone as it was going to get, she stood up slowly, gripping the porch railing, and went back inside. She took off her coat. She took off her boots. She washed her hands at the kitchen sink in water, as hot as she could stand it. She went to James's chair. She reached into her pocket and took out the patch. She held it in her hands and looked at it. The skull, the wings, the letters. She thought about Cole Decker walking away down Maple Creek Road that morning. She thought about the way Eli had waved 3 times. She thought about Sarah's letter, the sandwich preference, the laugh, but the whole face the fear of the dark. She thought about 6 doors. She thought about the 7th. If I had locked it 5 minutes earlier. She put the patch on the side table next to James's chair. She reached up and turned off the lamp. She sat in the dark. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Not a storm, just the ordinary cold of a Minnesota February doing what it did, indifferent and permanent, and entirely unsympathetic to the things that were happening inside the house as it moved around. Maddie Harmon sat in the dark in her dead husband's chair, in a house that felt emptier than it had 3 nights ago, and she held onto the knowledge that she had done the right thing with both hands, the way you hold on to something in a current, and she did not let go. The letter from the church arrived on a Wednesday morning 9 days after the storm. It came in a plain white envelope with the Oak Ridge Community Church return address printed in the upper left corner, and Maddie almost did not open it because she had been receiving letters in plain white envelopes her whole life and knew that the envelopes which looked the most ordinary were frequently the ones containing the least ordinary news. She opened it at the kitchen table with her second cup of coffee. It was a single page. The language was formal in the way that formal language is sometimes used as a cushion around a blow, something soft wrapped around something hard. The church council had convened. A matter of community concern had been raised. After deliberation and prayer, the council had voted to suspend her membership privileges pending a period of reflection and restoration. 22 years. She had joined Oak Ridge Community Church in the winter that Leroy was 20 years old and she was 49 and newly aware that she needed something to put between herself and the particular loneliness of a marriage that was good but not easy, a son who was bright but beginning to drift in directions she could feel but not yet name. She had walked into that church on a Sunday in February, and a woman named Norma Fisk had slid over in the pew to make room for her and said in a voice that expected nothing in return, "You look like you could use a cup of coffee after service." And that had been the beginning of 22 years. 22 years of Sunday mornings, of potlucks and funerals, in the particular intimacy of sitting next to the same people week after week while life moved around you all. She had held Norma's hand through chemotherapy. She had read the scripture at the service for James. She had taught the children's Bible class for 11 consecutive years until her hip made the small chairs impossible. All of it suspended, pending reflection and restoration. At the bottom of the letter, the council members had signed their names. 8 signatures. She read through them with the careful attention of someone looking for something specific. The 6th name down, Norma Fisk. Maddie read the name twice. Then she folded the letter back into its envelope and placed it in the kitchen drawer where she kept the things that required a response she was not yet ready to give. She finished her coffee. She washed her cup. She went to James's chair and sat down and looked out the window at the February morning, which was pale and still, and offered her nothing in the way of comfort. She thought so that is how it is. She thought 22 years. She thought Norma Fisk sat in a church and raised her hand and voted yes. She did not cry. She had cried the night she scrubbed the graffiti off her welcome mat in the dark, while Norma watched from the window and did not come out, and the crying had not helped, and so she had stopped doing it. What she felt now was something quieter and colder than crying. It was the feeling of a door closing on the inside. Not slammed, just closed, firmly, with a soft click. She had lived in Oak Ridge for 31 years. She had driven people to doctor's appointments and sat with them in hospital waiting rooms, and brought food when there was illness and flowers when there was death, and her particular brand of plain, practical kindness that asked for nothing back and expected nothing, because expecting things led to the specific pain she was currently sitting with in James's chair on a Wednesday morning. She thought about Cole Decker somewhere out there in the winter, working his way back to something like standing. She thought about Eli probably asking for pancakes, probably afraid of the dark, but refusing to admit it. She thought about Sarah Decker, who had sewn a letter into a bear for a stranger. She got up and made herself another cup of coffee and got on with the day. The days that followed had a particular quality. Not dramatic, just diminished. The small reductions of a life being turned down like a radio, one notch at a time. The neighbor boy who had always waved when she checked the mail stopped waving. Not rudely, he simply looked at something else when she appeared. She understood this was not his choice. It was his mother's. The woman at the pharmacy, who had always asked about her hip, stopped asking. She filled the prescription without looking up. Maddie took the bag and said thank you to the top of the woman's head. At the grocery store, people changed aisles. She had been a fixture in this town for 3 decades. She had been the woman who remembered birthdays and brought casseroles and could be counted on. Now she was something that required an aisle change. The arithmetic of it was simple and terrible. One open door had subtracted everything else. She scrubbed the welcome mat again. The red paint had faded to a ghostly pink stain that you had to know was there to see. She knew it was there. She kept going. She was planting bulbs in the hard February ground, working with a hand trowel because her hip would not allow kneeling for long, when she first became aware that someone had parked on the street in front of her house and was sitting there without getting out. She straightened up slowly. The car was a Civic, maybe 10 years old, the kind of tired gray that starts as a color and gradually becomes a condition. She could not see the driver clearly from the yard. She went back to her bulbs. After another few minutes, she heard the car door. She turned around. Leroy Harmon was 43 years old and looked older in the particular way that certain kinds of living can add years to a face. He was thinner than she remembered, which was saying something because he had been thin at the last time she had seen him 5 years ago. The thinness now was not the thinness of a young man who does not yet sit still long enough to eat. It was the thinness of someone whose body had been spending itself on something other than upkeep. He stood at the edge of her yard and looked at her. She looked at him. There was a woman in the passenger seat of the Civic. Maddie could see the shape of her through the window. She had not gotten out. Leroy, Maddie kept her voice level, the trowel in her hand. He took a few steps toward her. He stopped again. He looked at the house, at the new paint on the porch railing that Cole had touched up before he left. At the plaque Cole had not yet put up because he had not yet come back, though he had called twice to say he was working toward it. Heard some things, Leroy said. She waited. About you and some Hell's Angel. She went back to the bulbs. She had 3 more to get in before the ground froze again. A man and his child needed help, she said. I helped them. Word is there is money involved. She pressed a bulb into the ground. There is no money, Leroy. He was quiet for a moment. He shifted his weight. She could hear the particular fidgeting of someone whose body is not entirely under its own management. You look good, Mom, he said. The words came out sideways, like he had not intended to say them. She did not look up. You did not come to tell me I look good, she said. The woman in the Civic got out. Maddie had not asked her to get out. She had not been invited. She got out with the ease of someone who was accustomed to entering spaces without being invited, and she stood beside the car and looked at the house the way a person looks at an item they are pricing. Her name was Lena Pruitt. Maddie did not know this yet. What she knew was the look, the particular economy of movement, the eyes that assessed and calculated while the mouth arranged itself into something pleasant. She had seen that look before, not on criminals, not on dangerous people, on people who had learned that looking pleasant was the most effective tool for a specific kind of work. Leroy brought her over, introductions were made. Lena smiled and said she had heard so much about Maddie and that it was just wonderful to finally meet her, and what a lovely home. Each word was placed with precision. Maddie said it was nice to meet her and went back to her bulbs. They stayed 20 minutes. Lena did most of the talking. She asked questions that were not really questions, the kind designed to map the territory rather than learn about a person. What does a house like this run for these days? Do you have family nearby? How long have you been on your own? Maddie answered in the shortest sentences that would not be considered rude. After they left, she sat on the porch steps for a few minutes and watched the gray Civic drive away. Something about that woman sat wrong. Not any one thing, the sum of things, the way her eyes moved while her face stayed pleasant, the questions that built on each other without ever arriving at warmth. The way she had touched Leroy's arm twice at moments when Leroy seemed about to say something unscripted. 3 days later, Maddie was at the kitchen table paying bills when she heard the Civic pull up outside. She looked out the window. Leroy was asleep in the passenger seat. Lena was in the driver's seat, phone to her ear. The window on the driver's side was cracked open. Maddie was not trying to listen. Lena's voice came in fragments. The night air was cold and carried sound. Maddie sat very still. Same play as Wichita, Lena said. Old lady alone, house worth something. Just need to find where it is. A pause. He is useful. He gets us in. After that, it does not matter. Another pause. Lena laughed at something. By morning we are gone. He will not do anything about it. He never does. The car window went up. Maddie sat at the kitchen table and looked at her bill for the electric company. Her hands were very still on the paper. Same play as Wichita. He never does. She thought about Leroy asleep in the passenger seat. She thought about the particular way addiction strips a person of the peripheral vision that would let them see clearly what is happening around them. She thought about love in its many forms, including the form that says you can see someone and still not be able to save them from what they cannot yet see themselves. She got up and checked her locks. She checked them twice. She did not sleep well that night or the 2 nights following. The call from the church council came on a Thursday afternoon. Not a letter this time, a call from the council chairman, a man named Douglas Pratt, whom she had known since he moved to Oak Ridge 12 years ago. He spoke carefully and she listened carefully, and when he was done, she understood the shape of what was happening with a clarity that was not comfortable. The suspension was not truly about concern for her well-being, though that was the language being used. It was about the optics of association. The church had a reputation in the community, and a woman in its membership who was publicly linked with Hell's Angels, even through an act of demonstrable mercy, was a complication they were not willing to carry. She thanked Douglas Pratt for calling. She hung up. She sat in James's chair and thought about reputation and its relationship to actual goodness. She thought about Jesus and the specific people he had chosen to eat dinner with and what the religious establishment of his time had made of those choices. She thought Norma Fisk might benefit from revisiting some of those passages. She did not call Norma Fisk to say this. She got up and made soup. The night they came, she was ready only in the sense that some part of her had been waiting for it. She had heard the Civic park on the street at 10. She had turned off the kitchen light and sat in the dark and told herself she was imagining things, that the timing was coincidence that Leroy would not do this, that the Leroy she had known before the drugs was still in there, and that Leroy would not bring a woman into her house in the middle of the night to take what little she had. She had told herself these things before. She had believed them before at various times to varying degrees. The belief had not always been warranted. At midnight, she heard the front door. Not forced. She had not changed the lock on the handle. She had told herself it was because she could not afford a locksmith. She understood now, sitting in the dark of her living room, that this had not been the reason. Leroy. His voice came from the hallway, slurred slightly at the edges. Alert in the center, the way certain drugs produce an alertness that is worse than sleepiness. Mom, I know you are awake. She was already out of the chair. She had her cane. She moved to the hallway. He looked terrible. Not different from when she had seen him in the yard, but worse, in the particular way that things look worse at night. The eyes too bright. The hands already starting to move before he needed them to move. Lena was behind him, already looking at the room with those pricing eyes. "Leroy," she said, "what are you doing here?" "Came to see my mother. Is that a crime?" "It is midnight." He moved past her into the living room. She heard Lena's feet on the floor, already moving down the hall, already starting. "What are you looking for?" Maddie said. Her voice was quiet. It had gone somewhere past fear and into a cold clarity she recognized from other emergencies, from the night she had held a dying baby in her arms in a hospital and found that fear was less useful than focus. "There is money here." He was opening the drawer of the side table, checking under the lampshade. The movements of someone who had thought about this. "There is no money, Leroy. Hell's Angel pays you to stay quiet, or you are in on whatever they are doing. A man and his child were cold, and I let them in," she said. "There is nothing else." From down the hall came the sound of drawers being open, Lena efficient and purposeful in her work. Maddie moved to the hallway entrance. "Tell her to stop," she said. Leroy spun around and she saw it in his face then. The thing she had seen before at the inn 5 years ago, the thing that was not quite Leroy anymore, and not quite not Leroy either. The desperation that had worn his face like a mask. "You always had money for everything else," he said. "College fund, Dad's hospital bills, everything else. Never for me when I actually needed it." Maddie said nothing. "8 years ago, the program, you paid for 3 days of it, and then the insurance ran out and you told me we would figure it out, and then nothing. 2 weeks later, I am out on my own." She looked at him. "Is that what you think happened? Is that what happened?" She was quiet for a moment. From down the hall, she heard Lena opening the closet. She heard boxes being moved. "Leroy," she said, "listen to me. I am listening. 8 years ago, when you went into that program, the insurance covered the first 2 weeks. When it ran out, I paid out of pocket for the third week. When the third week ran out, I went to the bank." He stared at her. "I took a second mortgage on this house," she said, "to pay for 30 days of your treatment. I did not tell you because I did not want you to feel the weight of it on top of everything else you were already carrying." The room was quiet. "You paid for the whole 30 days. Leroy's voice had changed. "Yes, with a mortgage." "Yes. And you never told me." She held his gaze. "You completed the 30 days. And then 2 weeks after you came home, you used again. And 6 weeks after that, your father died." She stopped. "I did not tell you because I thought telling you would make it worse. I thought knowing you had failed something that had cost everything would hurt you more than help you." He looked like something had gone out of him, like a light switched off. "You lost the house money for me," he said. "We kept the house, but yes, I gave everything I had to that 30 days, and I would do it again. And I still," his voice went somewhere small and terrible. "Yes." She watched him understand it, the specific shape of it. Not that she had abandoned him financially, which was the story he had carried for 5 years, but that she had given everything, and it had not been enough, and she had never told him because she had loved him too much to let him know the math. The silence stretched. From down the hall, Lena's voice calling to Leroy. She had found the closet with the winter coats. She wanted to know if there was anything in the coat pockets. Leroy did not answer her. Something was happening in his face. Something complicated and slow and painful, the kind of reckoning that does not happen all at once, but begins in a moment and takes a long time to finish. Then Lena appeared in the doorway with her eyes bright and her hands moving. She had found the tin on the kitchen shelf, the one behind the flour. Maddie's rent money, $300 saved carefully over 6 weeks from her Social Security check. "There it is," Lena said. Leroy did not look at the money. He looked at his mother. Lena was already moving through the living room, and the next several minutes happened the way disasters happen, too fast and too loud, and without the quality of something that can be stopped once it has begun. Books off shelves, the side table knocked over. The framed photograph of James and Maddie at Yellowstone coming off the wall, and the glass going across the floor in a bright spray. Maddie moved toward the photograph. Her hip betrayed her, and she stumbled and caught herself on the doorframe and stood there, while Lena swept her arm across the bookshelf and more things fell. She heard Leroy's voice saying Lena once, then not saying it again. Lena found the small wooden box on the mantel, the one with James's wedding band and Maddie's mother's cameo brooch, and the baby photo of Leroy at 3 months old, round-cheeked, and laughing at something the camera could not see. She opened it. She took out the brooch and looked at it and put it in her pocket. She dropped the box on the floor. The baby photograph fell out. Maddie watched it fall. Lena looked at it on the floor and stepped on it. Not by accident, deliberately. The heel of her boot coming down on Leroy at 3 months old. Maddie moved without entirely deciding to move. She swung her cane. Not hard. She was 71 years old with a bad hip, and she was not pretending to be something she was not. But she swung it. Lena stepped back and laughed. The laugh of someone who is not afraid of the thing in front of them. Then Lena saw the bear on the end table. Eli's bear. The one Maddie had repaired, the one with the letter inside the one she had set carefully on the end table after Sarah's words had put her in a chair for a long time. Lena picked it up. She turned it over in her hands, examining it with those pricing eyes. Then she looked at Maddie. "The biker kid's toy," she said. "Leave his junk at your house. Put it down," Maddie said. Her voice was very quiet. Lena set it on the arm of the sofa. Then she pushed it off onto the floor. Maddie crossed the room and picked it up. She held it in both arms. Leroy was standing in the doorway between the living room and the hall. He was watching. His hands were in his jacket pockets. He was very still. Lena counted the $300 and put it in her own pocket. She looked around the room with a final sweep of those assessment eyes and seemed satisfied with the inventory. "We should go," she said. Leroy did not move. "Leroy," Lena said. Her voice shifted slightly. Not loud, just firmer. The tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He looked at his mother. She was standing in the middle of the destroyed living room holding a child's stuffed bear in both arms. The lamp was on the floor. The photograph was broken. The books were everywhere. The baby picture was under Lena's boot print. She looked back at him. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Something crossed his face. She had seen that particular expression before long ago, when Leroy was 11 years old and had broken the kitchen window with a baseball and come inside to find her already standing there, and had understood in that moment that the thing he had done could not be undone, and that she knew it and he knew it, and the gap between them in that moment was the shape of the irreversible. She had crossed that gap then. She had pulled him in and held him. She could not cross it now. "Leroy," Lena said again. He turned and walked out. The front door closed. Maddie stood in the living room for a long moment. She could hear the Civic outside. She heard the engine start. She heard it pull away. The silence after was different from the silence before they had come. Fuller, heavier, the silence of a space that has been gone through. She did not move for a while. Then she looked down at the bear in her arms. She turned it over. She felt along the seam she had repaired. Still intact. The letter still inside where she had left it. Sarah's words in their careful handwriting, folded precisely and safe. She set the bear down on the righted side table. She smoothed its ears. She began to pick things up. This was the work. This had always been the work. Not the drama, not the confrontation. The afterward. The getting back down on your knees and picking up each piece and deciding whether it could be saved or whether it needed to be let go. She picked up James's photograph. The glass was gone, but the photograph itself was intact. She set it against the wall. She picked up the baby picture of Leroy. The boot print had creased one corner and left a faint mark across his 3-month-old face. She held it for a moment. Then she put it in her pocket next to Sarah's letter and the Hells Angels patch. She went through the house room by room with the flashlight on her phone assessing. The kitchen drawers emptied on the floor. The coat closet gone through. The small tin that had held the rent money now empty and on its side behind the stove. She found the tin and set it on the counter. $300. 6 weeks of careful saving. She stood at the kitchen counter for a moment. Then she looked at the bear on the end table. She walked back over and picked it up and looked at it. She thought about Leroy standing in the doorway while Lena went through the room. She thought about what he had not done. He had not touched the bear. Lena had touched it, had dropped it, had walked away from it. But Leroy had not touched it. And at the end, when Lena was already at the door and telling him to come, he had turned back and looked at his mother one more time. She had thought it was guilt. She thought now it might have been something else. She pressed the bear gently with her fingers. The seam held, the letter inside its careful folds. Among everything he had helped destroy, he had not taken the one thing that belonged to a stranger's child. He had not taken it, and he had not let Lena leave with it. When Lena dropped it on the floor, it had stayed on the floor, and Leroy had made no move to pick it up or pocket it or give it to Lena. He had left it where it fell. She could not say exactly what that meant. She only knew what it felt like standing in the wreckage of her living room to see the bear sitting unmolested on the floor when everything else had been touched. It felt like something that had not yet finished happening, like a sentence that had stopped in the middle. She set the bear back in its place. She got the broom from the kitchen closet and began to sweep. 20 miles away in the parking lot of a truck stop off Route 9, Lena Pruitt counted $300 for the second time and found it the same amount it had been the first time, which was to say not enough. She looked at the sleeping man in the passenger seat. She looked at the road and the headlights going away into the dark. She made a calculation the way she made all her calculations quickly and without sentiment. At 4:30 in the morning, she drove Leroy to the Oak Ridge bus depot. She told him she needed to clear her head. She told him she would be right back. She left him on the bench in the depot with his jacket and his shaking hands, and she did not come back. She was on the highway by 4:45. She had a phone number in Kansas City and a storage unit in Wichita, and the $100 bill she kept folded inside her bra for situations like this, which was to say, situations where staying was no longer worth the trouble of staying. Leroy waited until 7 before he understood she was not coming. He sat on the bench in the depot and watched the buses come and go, and felt the particular sensation of a person who has been used so thoroughly that the using is only now becoming visible to them. Not because they were stupid, but because they had been participating in it willingly, which is a different thing and in some ways worse. He thought about his mother standing in the living room holding the bear. He thought about her face. He thought about what she had said, the second mortgage, the 30 days, the silence she had kept because she had thought the truth was heavier than the lie. He thought about her standing at that kitchen counter at 6 in the morning, 8 years ago, the morning after he had come home from the program making him eggs. He had not understood then what had been behind her making those eggs. He had thought it was just breakfast. He understood now that it had been everything she had left. He put his face in his hands. He sat like that for a long time. The depot filled and emptied around him. Drivers came and went. The fluorescent lights buzzed with their particular tuneless frequency. His hands were shaking. They were always shaking now to some degree. He had learned to account for it the way you account for background noise working around it, holding things with both hands moving carefully. He had not used last night. He had not used the night before, not because he was strong, because Lena had not offered anything, and he had not gone looking, and he was sitting now in the specific space that opened up when substances were not managing his nervous system, a space that felt like the inside of a held breath, wide open, terrifying, completely without cover. He thought about the bear on the floor. He had not taken it. He could not have explained if asked exactly why. Something about it had stopped him. Some understanding arriving below the level of his conscious thought that there were still categories of things he would not do even now, even like this. He was not sure if that meant anything. He was not sure anything meant anything, but it was there. He sat in the depot until 10 in the morning. Then he got up and walked to the payphone on the wall. He stood in front of it for a while. He did not call the number in his pocket, the one that would bring him what his hands were asking for. He did not call it. He thought about who else there was to call. He thought about the answer to that question. He put the receiver back. He walked out of the depot into the February morning. The cold was clean and still the kind that follows a storm, and it hit him full in the face, and he stood in it and breathed. He thought about his mother in that living room, everything she had done, everything he had destroyed, the photograph on the floor and the baby picture under the boot, and her standing there holding the bear with both arms and not begging him to stop. Not begging him. That was the part that kept returning. She had not begged, she had looked at him, and she had been very quiet, and she had not asked him to be different from what he was in that moment. He did not know yet what to do with that. He walked to his car in the truck stop lot. He sat behind the wheel. He put his hands on the cold steering wheel, and felt them shaking and watched them shake and did not try to stop them. He thought, I have to go somewhere. He thought, I do not know where. He did not start the car yet. He sat with his shaking hands and his wide-open, terrible clarity, and the winter light coming through the windshield, and he stayed with the feeling instead of trying to solve it, which was new, which was not comfortable, which was nonetheless what he did. Back on Maple Creek Road, Maddie Harmon had finished sweeping the kitchen floor just after 6 in the morning. She had filled 2 garbage bags with broken things and one with things that could be salvaged. She had set James's photograph in the living room, glass gone, but the image intact. She had picked up every book and put them back on the shelves in roughly their proper order. The house looked like a house again, damaged in places, but standing. She went to James's chair and sat down. She was exhausted in the bone-deep way that comes not just from a sleepless night, but from the expenditure of a particular kind of emotional energy that has no name, but everyone who has ever loved a difficult person knows exactly what it costs. She put her hand in her pocket. She felt the patch, the baby photo, the letter. She sat with all of it. She thought about 22 years in a church that had voted to suspend her for opening a door. She thought about $300 that was gone. She thought about Leroy's face when she told him about the mortgage. The way the story he had carried for 5 years had shifted under him in real time. The particular expression of someone whose architecture has just been shown to them from a new angle. She thought about what came next. She did not know. She had learned in 71 years that there were situations in which the next step was not yet visible, and that pressing forward into the invisibility before it resolved was not courage, but impatience. She had learned to sit with the not knowing. She had not learned to enjoy it. She put her head back against the chair. She thought, James, what would you say? She thought she knew. He had been a practical man, a man who had believed in doing the next obvious thing and not making the next obvious thing any harder than it already was. He had been a man who said things like, the problem is never as bad in the morning, and meant them without sentimentality. She looked at the winter light coming through the window. She thought, the morning is here. She thought, I am still here. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but she rested. Her hands settled in her lap. Her breathing slowed. The house was quiet around her, the particular quiet of a place that has been through something and is now in the stillness on the other side of it. The patch was in her pocket. The letter was in her pocket. She held onto both without taking either out. The February light moved across the floor the way it always did, the way it had moved for 31 years in this house, indifferent to what had happened the night before, going about its businesses of marking the hours in thin, pale strips across the hardwood. She watched it move. She breathed. She waited for what came next to show itself. She heard them before she saw them. She was in the backyard with her hand trowel working at the frozen ground, the way she had been working at most things lately, slowly and without much expectation of immediate result when the sound reached her. Low at first, the way distant thunder is low, felt more than heard, a vibration in the air that arrived before any identifiable noise did. She stopped digging. She straightened up. The sound grew. It grew the way something grows when it is coming toward you with purpose, not spreading out in all directions the way a storm does, but directed, aimed, moving along a specific path. The sound of engines, not one engine, not 5. Many engines, and the number was impossible to estimate from the backyard because the number was simply too large for the frame of reference her experience provided. She walked around the side of the house. She stopped at the corner and looked down Maple Creek Road and did not move for several seconds because what she saw did not immediately resolve into something her mind could organize. The street was filled with motorcycles. Not the way a street is filled when a few people are parked along the curb. Filled in the way water fills a container, edge to edge, it as far as she could see in both directions, engines idling, chrome catching the thin February light, black leather everywhere she looked. They were still coming around the bend at the far end of the road, the line of them continuous, unhurried, deliberate. She put her hand on the corner of the house to steady herself. The lead motorcycle pulled up in front of her yard and stopped. The rider was a large man, broad through the chest, with a silver beard, cut close in the particular posture of someone accustomed to being the person other people looked to when a situation required someone to look to. He cut his engine. The man beside him cut his. One by one, in a wave that moved back down the long line of them, the engines went quiet. The silence that followed was extraordinary. The silence of 200 engines not running where 200 engines had just been. The lead rider removed his helmet. He had a face that had been through weather, through decades of it, and had come out the other side with the particular quality of something that has been tested and held. His eyes were steady, not hard, steady. Behind him, a second rider dismounted. Maddie saw the jacket. She recognized the jacket. And then she saw the passenger. Eli came off the back of the motorcycle and ran across the yard with the uncomplicated momentum of a 4-year-old who has identified a destination and sees no reason to approach it at any speed other than full. He hit her at knee height with both arms and held on. "Miss Maddie," he said it into the fabric of her coat. "Miss Maddie, we came." She held him. She put one hand on the back of his small head and held him the way you hold something you had not known you were going to see again. Cole Decker walked across the yard. He stopped a few feet from her. He looked at the house. She watched him take in the things she had not been able to fix on her own. The hole in the porch railing where something heavy had been thrown against it. The window on the side of the house where the lock had been forced, and she had taped it shut from the inside the welcome mat with its ghost of red paint. He looked at her face. "We heard," he said. "Jake got a call from his cousin on Elm Street. Said there were police lights outside your house. Said your son—" He stopped. She held Eli and looked at Cole. "I am all right," she said. The man with the silver beard had come across the yard. He stopped beside Cole and removed his gloves. "Mrs. Harmon." His voice was the voice of a man who had given orders in situations that required orders to be given clearly. "My name is Wade Burns. Most people call me Ironside. I am the chapter president. Cole told us what you did for his boy." He paused. "All of it, the door, the night, the soup he said you made at midnight for a man who had been turned away 6 times. She did not know what to say to this. She said nothing. "We also heard what happened after Wade said, with your son and the woman he brought." She looked at the street full of motorcycles. She looked at the men and the few women on them, all facing the house, all still. "You did not have to come," she said. "No, ma'am," Wade said. "We did not have to." He paused. "That is the point." Cole raised his hand, one gesture, and the street came alive again, not with engines, but with people dismounting, removing helmets, opening the storage compartments on the sides of their bikes. Toolboxes appeared. A truck came around the corner that she had not noticed before, a flatbed with lumber and supplies in the back. It parked in front of the house with the ease of something planned. They organized themselves the way a unit organizes itself, without confusion, without overlap. Each person moving to a task as if the tasks had been assigned before they arrived, which she would later learn they had been Cole having described the house to Wade in detail on the phone the night before. 2 men with a toolbox went to the porch railing. A woman with an electrician's belt went to the side of the house to look at the forced window. 3 more went around the back. Maddie stood in the middle of her yard and watched her house being taken care of by 200 strangers in Hell's Angels jackets, and felt something in her chest that she could not have named then and was not sure she could name now. Cole stayed beside her. "You did not have to drive back," she said. He looked at her sideways. "You saved my son's life, Mrs. Harmon. You keep saying that because it keeps being true." Eli was now at the porch, crouched down, examining something in the boards with the forensic interest of a small child who finds the world endlessly worthy of examination. He looked up at Cole. "Daddy, there is a gap here. I see it, buddy. The men are going to fix it. Can I watch? Stay out of their way." "I will stay out of their way, but can I watch?" "Yes." Eli settled himself on the porch steps with the satisfied air of someone who has secured the best seat. Wade Burns appeared at Maddie's elbow. "Mrs. Harmon," he said, "I would like to talk to you about some upgrades, if you will allow it. New locks, a security bar for the side window, a camera for the front porch. All of it is already paid for. We took a collection on the way here." She started to say she could not accept. He stopped her, not rudely, just with the quiet certainty of a man who had anticipated this response and prepared for it. "You are going to let us do this," he said, "not because you owe us anything, because you cannot go on living in a house where you do not feel safe, and a woman who opens her door to a child in a blizzard deserves to feel safe in her own home. Those are the only 2 reasons. They are enough." She looked at him. He looked back. She said, "The bedroom window lock has been broken for 2 years." He nodded. "We will get that too." He went to find the right person for the window lock. Maddie stood in her yard and watched the organized motion of 200 people moving around her house and thought about what it meant to be seen. Not looked at, seen. The distinction mattered. She had spent the last several weeks being looked at by people who had arranged what they saw into a category that suited their existing understanding of things. She had not been seen by them. She was being seen now, and the difference was the difference between a closed door and an open one. She went inside to make coffee. The kitchen was full of people within 20 minutes. Not intrusively, they moved through the space with the awareness of people who knew they were guests in someone else's house and acted accordingly. They asked before they used the bathroom. They did not open cabinets or drawers. They said thank you when she handed them coffee and meant it. A woman came in from outside. She was perhaps 40 with kind eyes set in a face that looked accustomed to both difficulty and warmth. Her arms were covered in intricate tattoos that Maddie did not try to read. She carried a toolbox and set it on the kitchen floor and straightened up. "Mrs. Harmon, my name is Darlene Rooks. I'm a nurse by training, but my daddy was an electrician, and he taught me what he knew. Cole said your lights have been flickering. I would like to look at your breaker box." Maddie showed her to the basement door. The house filled with the sounds of work, hammering from the porch, the high whine of a drill from the side window, the low voices of men discussing something about the roof where a branch from the storm had lifted 2 shingles. The smell of fresh lumber coming in when the back door opened. She stood at the kitchen counter and watched it and drank her coffee. After a while, Cole came in and stood beside her. He looked at the room, at the shelves she had restocked after the night of Leroy and Lena, the books back in their places, the photograph of James she had propped against the wall because the frame was still broken. "I can fix that frame," Cole said. She handed him her coffee cup and went to get it. He fixed the frame at the kitchen table with a small tube of wood glue from the junk drawer and 2 clamps he fashioned from binder clips. He worked with the same focused quietness she had seen the first night, the quality of a man who is most himself when his hands are doing something useful. While he worked, she stood at the counter and looked at the yard through the window. Eli had been absorbed into the activity in the way that small children sometimes are being passed from person to person, with the easy acceptance that children receive when they are good-natured and genuinely curious. He was currently sitting on the tailgate of the flatbed truck next to a man twice his size, who appeared to be explaining something about lumber grain with complete seriousness, while Eli listened with complete seriousness in return. She watched them for a moment. "Cole," she said, "can I ask you something?" He did not look up from the frame. "You can ask me anything. When you came that night, the blizzard." She paused. "You said you had been at your buddy Jake's place 2 towns over. You said there was a rally." He was quiet for a moment. "There was a rally," he said. She waited. He set down one of the binder clips. He looked at the table. "3 weeks before the blizzard, I had packed a bag for Eli." He stopped. "A real bag, not a travel bag. The kind of bag you pack when you are not planning to come back for something." She did not move. "I was going to take him to my sister in Duluth. Leave him there. I had decided." He looked at his hands. "I had decided I was too broken to be a good father to him. That he would be better off with Ellen, who has a house and a yard and a husband and 2 kids already, and would take him without question. I had it all planned." She thought about the letter, Sarah's letter inside the bear. She thought about what Sarah had asked of whoever found them. "Please see him clearly." "What stopped you?" she said. Cole picked up the binder clip again. He positioned it on the frame. "I was packing his clothes and I found the bear in the laundry. Sarah had put it through the wash before she went into the hospital the last time. It still smelled like her laundry soap." He stopped. "I sat down on the floor of his room with the bear in my hands, and I could not get up for a while." He did not continue immediately. She did not press him. "I told myself I would try one more thing. The rally was 3 days away. I thought if I could just get to the rally, be around the guys, maybe something would shift. Maybe I would find something to hold on to." He paused. "The storm hit on the way back. The ice took the bike out from under me, and I was in a ditch with Eli, and the temperature dropping, and I started knocking on doors. The house was quiet around them except for the sounds of the work outside. She said Wade told me. This morning. What you had decided. Cole looked up. He thought I should know, she said. Cole was quiet. She said Sarah knew. He stared at her. She said the letter, the one inside the bear. She wrote it before she died. She knew you were going to need someone to find you. She asked whoever it was to see you clearly. She paused. She knew you were going to break. She prepared for it. She loved you that specifically. He put both hands flat on the table. He looked at them. She wrote a letter, he said. She had it sewn into the bear so it would stay safe, Maddie said. I found it when I was repairing the seam. I have been carrying it. She went to her coat on the hook by the back door. She reached into the pocket and took out the letter, still folded on its original creases, the paper soft now from being handled so many times. She brought it to him. He took it with both hands. He read it once, then again. She watched his face go through things she did not name because they were his. After a long time, he folded it carefully along its creases and held it. She knew, he said. His voice was very quiet. She knew you, Maddie said, and she trusted that the person who found you would see the same thing she saw. She was right to trust that. He held the letter for a while longer, then he looked at her. I would like to keep this, he said. It was always yours, she said. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket close to his chest. He picked up the binder clip. He went back to the frame. His hands were steadier than before. By noon, the smell of food had joined the smell of lumber and fresh paint. Someone had set up a grill in the driveway. She did not know whose grill it was. It had appeared the way many things appeared that morning, as if summoned by the general will of people who understood that work required fuel. There were folding tables along the side of the house with food on them, casserole dishes, and bags of chips, and a massive pot of something that smelled like chili. Neighbors were standing at the edge of the yard. Not all of them, not even most of them, but some. Standing at the property line with the careful posture of people who want to be somewhere but are not certain of their welcome. She saw Doris Ketterman from the post office. She saw the Henderson boy from 2 houses down who had always waved at her. She saw Douglas Pratt from the church council, standing slightly behind the others, looking at the ground. She saw Norma Fisk. Norma was at the back of the small group, slightly apart. She was holding a covered dish in both hands. Her coat was the red one she wore every winter, the one Maddie had helped her pick out at the Duluth outlet the winter before James died. She was looking at Maddie with the expression of a woman who has prepared herself for a response she deserves and is not looking forward to receiving. Wade appeared at Maddie's shoulder. You want me to say something to them? No, Maddie said. This is mine. She walked across the yard. She stopped in front of Norma. Norma held out the dish. I made the green bean casserole, your recipe, the one you gave me in 2009. Maddie looked at the dish. She looked at Norma. She said, I know it was you. The 6th house. Norma's face did not change. She had known this was coming. She had prepared for it. The preparation showed in the steadiness of her expression, which was the steadiness of someone holding something together by will. Yes, Norma said. It was me. He had a dying child in his arms. I know, you watched him from your window. Norma's steadiness developed a crack. I was afraid, she said. I saw the jacket, and I was afraid, and I did not open the door, and then I saw him move away, and I told myself he would find help somewhere else. I told myself. She stopped. I told myself for 3 days, and then I found out it was your house he found, and I understood exactly what I had done. Maddie said nothing. And then I went to the church council, Norma said. Her voice was very quiet now. Instead of coming to you directly, instead of standing on your porch and telling you what I am telling you now, I went to the council because it was easier to make you the problem than to face what I had done. And I voted yes because, she stopped, because if you were wrong, then I did not have to be as wrong. The February air was cold and still. Someone at the grill turned something over, and the smell of it moved through the yard. Maddie looked at this woman she had known for 22 years. This woman who had made her laugh at the worst time and driven her to places she could not drive herself to, and sat beside her in a pew more times than either of them had counted. She took the casserole dish. Come in, she said. Put your coat on the hook by the back door. The food is set up along the side of the house. Norma looked at her, a look of someone who had expected the door to close and is standing in the opening of it, not yet believing it is real. Maddie, she said, I am so sorry. I know you are, Maddie said. Come in. She carried the casserole to the food table and set it down, and went back to supervising the work on her house, which was progressing with the steady momentum of people who know what they are doing and are doing it because they want to. Douglas Pratt found her by the porch steps an hour later. He stood in front of her with the careful posture of a man choosing his words. He said the council would like to restore your membership. We had a meeting this week. The vote was unanimous. She looked at him. I appreciate that, she said. I will come back when I am ready, on my own terms. He nodded. He did not argue. She respected him slightly for that. The afternoon moved the way good afternoons move, without urgency, with the sense of something being accomplished that is worth accomplishing. Eli had accumulated a shadow in the form of a large man named Horace, who seemed to have been appointed his unofficial guide to the proceedings, and took the role with evident pleasure, walking Eli through each repair as it was completed and explaining what had been wrong and how it had been fixed in the patient terms of someone who has always believed that children deserve accurate information. Darlene came out of the basement and reported that the electrical panel had 2 issues she had addressed and that the lights should no longer flicker. The men on the roof replaced 3 shingles. The side window got a new lock and a security bar. The front porch got new boards where 2 of the old ones had rotted, and fresh paint in the color Maddie chose from the paint samples. Someone produced a warm cream that was close to, but not exactly the color James had painted it 30 years ago. Close enough. At 4 in the afternoon, Wade gathered everyone in the front yard. Mrs. Harmon, he said loud enough for all of them to hear. Would you come out here, please? She came down the porch steps. The yard was full of people, not just the Hells Angels. Neighbors too, the ones who had come in from the property line as the afternoon progressed, drawn in by the food and the activity, and perhaps by something else, the demonstration in real time of what it looks like when people decide to show up for someone. Wade held something, a wooden plaque rectangular finished with care. One of our members does woodwork, he said. He made this last night after Cole called. He turned it so she could read it. It said Maddie Harmon. Below that, in letters slightly smaller, it said the 7th door. She read it twice. The 7th door, she said. 6 houses closed, Wade said. You were the 7th, the one that opened. He paused. That is who you are, Mrs. Harmon. That is what you did. We would like to put this beside your front door so that everyone who comes to this house knows what kind of woman lives here. She looked at the plaque for a long time. She thought about 6 doors. She thought about standing in her hallway with her thumb on the handle lock. She thought about the sound Eli had made and how it had moved through her and taken her hand off the lock before she had decided to move it. She thought about what it cost to be the 7th door when 6 doors before you had already decided the cost was too high. She said yes. Cole hung it himself with 2 screws and a level he borrowed from Horace. He stepped back and looked at it. Maddie stood beside him and looked at it. Then Wade produced an envelope. He held it out to her. The chapters within 300 miles contributed, he said. Every one of them. Cole made some calls last night. She looked at the envelope. We are calling it the Maddie Harmon Family Emergency Fund, Wade said. For single parents who need help staying housed. For families who need winter coats. For people who are 1-car repair away from losing everything. You manage it. You decide who it goes to. We will contribute every year. She took the envelope. She opened it. She looked at the check inside, $7,500. She looked at it for a long moment. You could help a great many people with that, Wade said. People who need a 7th door. She folded the check carefully and put it in her pocket next to the patch in the baby photograph. Thank you, she said. It came out smaller than she intended. She did not try to make it larger. Sometimes the right response to an overwhelming thing is a quiet one. Around her, people began to pack up. Toolboxes went back to bikes. The folding tables were folded. The grill cooled. People shook hands and said goodbye and mounted their motorcycles, and the sound of engines starting filled Maple Creek Road again. Not all at once, but one by one, each engine finding its voice and joining the rest until the sound was everything. They went the way they had come, down the road and around the bend, and then the sound fading, diminishing, becoming the memory of a sound rather than the sound itself, and then finally becoming silence. Cole and Eli were the last to leave. Eli stood on the porch beside Maddie and watched the last bikes disappear. Are they coming back? He said. Wade said Sunday dinners, Maddie said. Whenever they want. Eli nodded satisfied with this. Cole was at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked up at the plaque. He looked at Maddie. Sunday, he said. Sunday, she said. He reached into his jacket and produced something. The small front patch he had given her on the morning he and Eli had left 2 weeks and a lifetime ago. He held it out. I gave you this as a promise, he said. A promise that any Hell's Angel anywhere would help you if you showed it to them. I meant it then. He paused. But I want to give you something else along with it. He reached back into his jacket and produced a second patch. Different from the first, she could see that it had been made by hand, the kind of careful handwork that takes time and intention. He held it out. Honorary member, he said. Wade says only 15 people in 50 years have been given one. He looked at it in his own hand before she took it. You are the 16th. She took it from him. She held both patches. The one he had left the first morning and the one he was giving her now. She thought about what it meant to be claimed by people. Not for what you had done specifically, but for who you were, for the fact of being the kind of person who opened the door. For the seventh door itself as an act that defines something about your character that was worth claiming. She put them both in her pocket. They are safe in there, she said, with the other things I'm keeping. He looked at her for a moment. That expression again, the one she had seen the first morning. The one that was trying to memorize something. Sunday, he said. He took Eli's hand and they went down the walk and Cole got the motorcycle started while Eli climbed on and got his small helmet situated and looked back at her 3 times, waving each time, and then they were gone. She stood on the porch until the sound of the engine faded. She went inside. She locked the new locks, all of them. Then she stood in the hallway for a moment and looked at the locks. New deadbolts, new chain, handle lock, and the alarm Wade's people had installed the small panel by the door with its green light meaning armed and safe. She had always locked for fear. She realized now she was locking for the first time from something else. Not fear of what was outside, sureness about what was inside. The things worth protecting, the life worth protecting. She went to James's chair. She sat down. She reached into her pocket and took out Sarah's letter. She unfolded it carefully on her knee. She read it again, though she had long since memorized it the way you reread something, not to learn it, but to stay inside it a little longer. To whoever loves my son after I am gone, you are exactly the person I prayed he would find. Thank you for opening the door. She turned the letter over. She had kept the back blank all this time. She had carried it for weeks without writing anything on it, knowing there was something to write, but not yet knowing what it was. She got up and found a pen in the kitchen drawer. She came back and sat down. She wrote slowly in her careful hand in the margin of Sarah Decker's letter. I saw him. And in doing so, I finally saw myself. She folded the letter back on its creases and held it in her lap. She looked at James's photograph on the shelf, frame repaired clean in its proper place. His face looking out at the room the way it always did, with the specific expression he had in photographs of not quite being comfortable with the camera, but being willing to hold still for the person behind it. She said, "Did you see all that, James?" The room was quiet. She said, "I think I am going to be all right." She thought he would have said something practical in response. Something like, "Of course you are," or "I never doubted it." He had been a man who believed in people more consistently than they sometimes deserved, which she had occasionally found frustrating, and now found she would give almost anything to hear one more time. 3 weeks later, at 2 in the morning, her phone rang. She was asleep in this bedroom, the first full night of the sleep she had had in a month, and the phone brought her up from it, the way phones at 2 in the morning always do, with the particular jolt of a heart that knows instinctively that calls at that hour are not casual. She looked at the screen. Leroy. She sat up. She answered. His voice was thin and working at something. She could hear the effort in it, the effort of a person making a phone call when every part of them is pulling in another direction. "Mom," he said. "Leroy, I am at the tap room on Route 9. I am standing outside it. I have been standing outside for 20 minutes. She understood immediately. She put her feet on the floor. She reached for her coat. She found her keys on the nightstand. Her hand closed around them. She stopped. She sat on the edge of the bed with her keys in her hand and did not move. This was the moment. She recognized it the way you recognize a place you have been before, even when you are approaching it from a different direction. She had been here before in various forms for 15 years. She had gotten up. She had gotten in the car. She had driven to wherever he was and been the person who showed up because showing up was what love did, because showing up was what mothers did, because she could not bear to be the person who did not show up. And every time she had shown up, she had shown him that the falling had a net, that someone would always come, that he could go as far as he went and she would still come. She sat on the edge of the bed. She thought about what Wade had told her about Cole. He had decided he was too broken to be a father. And then a door had opened, not because Cole had fixed himself, but because someone had made a different choice than the six before them. She thought about the difference between showing up for someone and showing up instead of someone. She thought, if I go, I am the net again. If I go, I am telling him that the ground is never real. She put the keys down on the nightstand. She picked up her phone. She called Cole. He answered on the second ring. She could hear that she had woken him and that he was already alert, already present. The quality of a man who has learned to come awake quickly. She told him where Leroy was. She told him what she was not going to do. There was a silence on the line. Then Cole said, I understand. I need someone to go, she said. Not to fix it, just to be there. I will go, he said. I will take Eddie and Marcus. We will be there in 20 minutes. She said, tell him I called you. Do not pretend you just happened to be there. Tell him I called you instead of coming myself. Cole was quiet for a moment. That is going to be hard for him to hear, he said. I know, she said. That is why I need him to hear it. She sat on the edge of the bed after she hung up. She did not lie back down. She sat with her hands in her lap and her keys on the nightstand and waited. The waiting was the hardest thing she had ever done. Harder than the night with Eli, which had been hard, in an active way, something to work against and through. This was hard in the way that stillness is hard when every instinct you have is telling you to move. She thought about love and what it required. She had always thought of love as the thing that ran toward, that answered the phone and came through the blizzard and opened the door and held the hairdryer until her hand cramped. She was not wrong. That was love. She had lived that love for 71 years, and she did not regret a minute of it. But there was another kind, the kind that had to learn to stop running, that had to stand still and let the person find their own way to the door, that had to trust against everything fear was saying, that the love which did not show up tonight was not abandonment, but the hardest form of faith. The faith that he could do it without her. The faith that he had to. 30 minutes after she had hung up with Cole, her phone lit up. A text from Cole. We are here. He is okay. He is talking. She exhaled. Another text 2 minutes later. He asked why you did not come. I told him what you said. He sat down on the curb. He is still sitting. Eddie is with him. She stared at the phone. A third text 15 minutes after that. He wants to go back to Crossroads tonight. They have a bed. We are taking him. She put the phone face down on the nightstand. She put her hands over her face. She sat like that for a while. Then she picked the phone back up and typed thank you. Cole replied, you made the harder call. That was you. She put the phone down and lay back on the bed and looked at the ceiling and breathed. The room was dark and quiet, and her keys were on the nightstand where she had put them, and Leroy was in a car with 3 Hells Angels heading back to the place where the work happened, and she was here in her own house, in her own bed, with her hands folded on her chest and the ceiling above her, and the plaque beside her front door that said what it said. In the morning, she got up and made coffee and sat in James's chair and watched the February light move across the floor and thought about what came next, not anxiously, but with the particular quiet attention of someone who has put down a weight they have been carrying for a long time and is learning what it feels like to stand without it. 90 days later, Leroy called from Crossroads on a Tuesday afternoon. I am here, he said. Still here. 90 days. She said, I am proud of you. He said, do not be proud yet. I am taking it one day at a time. She said, that is all any of us can do. He said, Mom. And then he stopped. She waited. He said, I know why you did not come that night. I have been thinking about it for 90 days. I want you to know I understand it. I did not understand it when it happened. It felt like, he stopped again. It felt like you had finally given up on me. She said, I know. He said, but that is not what it was. No, she said, it was the opposite of that. He was quiet for a moment. He said, I want to come and see you when I am ready. When I have done more of this, she said, when you are ready, my door is open. She heard him exhale. She heard in that exhale something that might have been the beginning of a person finding solid ground. On the first Sunday of March, Cole and Eli came for breakfast. Cole made pancakes. Eli sat at the kitchen table in the chair that had become his chair, over the weeks of Sunday visits, and ate 4 of them with maple syrup, and reported to Maddie in detail everything that had happened at preschool since she had last seen him, which had been 6 days ago, and apparently contained a significant quantity of events worth reporting. She listened to all of it. When Eli went to the living room to look at the bookshelf, which he had developed a relationship with over the weeks she and Cole sat at the kitchen table with their coffee, he said, "Wade called me last week. A family in Brainerd. Father is in the hospital, mother has 3 kids, and a car that will not start in the cold. She is about to lose the apartment. She said, send me the information." He said, "The fund is going to help a lot of people." She said, "That is the point." He said, "It is your point. You made it." She thought about 6 doors. She thought about what it had cost her to be the 7th and what it had given her. She thought about Sarah's letter and the sandwich preference and the bear sitting in its place on the end table where it had been since the night she found the letter and where it would stay. She thought about James in his chair. She thought about Leroy on a Tuesday 90 days clean saying, "I am taking it one day at a time." She thought about the specific grace of a door that opens when it is easier to keep it closed. She got up and refilled Cole's coffee. She went to the window and looked at the yard. The tulip bulbs she had planted in the frozen ground before any of this had happened were beginning to push up through the soil, small and green and improbable, doing what they did, regardless of what the winter had been. She stood at the window and watched them for a while. Behind her, Eli came back from the bookshelf. "Miss Maddie," he said, "can we look at the tulips?" "Yes, baby," she said. "Put your coat on." She got her own coat from the hook. She got her cane. She went to the front door and looked for a moment at the plaque beside it. The 7th door. She opened it. The March air was cold and clean and smelled like the particular smell of ground beginning to thaw, the smell of something that has been frozen for a long time and is beginning slowly and with great patience to come back. Eli went down the porch steps ahead of her. He crouched in the yard beside the first row of tulips and examined them with the focused attention of someone for whom the world is still new enough to be genuinely astonishing. "Daddy, look," he said. "They are coming up." "I see them," Buddy Cole said. He was standing at the bottom of the porch steps, his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at his son in the March light. Maddie came down the steps and stood beside him. They watched Eli examine the tulips. He was talking to them in the quiet, authoritative way of a 4-year-old who has decided that conversation is appropriate in this situation. She could not hear exactly what he was saying. It did not matter. What mattered was the sight of him, small and alive and warm, crouched in a yard in Minnesota in early March, talking to flowers that were coming up through the thaw. She reached into her coat pocket. She felt the patch. She felt the letter. She felt the baby photograph of Leroy at 3 months, round-cheeked and laughing. She held all of it without taking any of it out. She just held it the way you hold the things that have made you who you are, not to examine them, but simply to know they are there to carry them forward into the next day and the day after that, which is the only direction there is. The tulips were coming up. The door behind her was open.